This is Geek Gab with your host, Dornall, and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back, Geek Gab, for Monday, May 19th, 2025. Let's see. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of Italian, and I don't know how to pronounce this. I think it's pronounced giallo. A couple of Italian giallo for movies. But first, they have released the trailer for a Predator movie. That's not that movie, a different one. It's being released on streaming on Hulu in just a little bit. It is an animated movie called Predator Killer of Killers. And it's set in 3 different time periods where they face down a predator. It's set in Viking times, in Japanese shogunate times, and in, it looks like, World War II times. And the trailer looks pretty good. I don't know that the movie's going to be pretty good, but the trailer looks, the animation looks like they did a decent job. It's computer animated, obviously, but it looks decent. It's got a nice style to it. It isn't just a photocopy of like somebody else's style. And they don't seem to have made the Predator into a Gen Z Zoomer type. So I'm going to throw that up on my Twitter page for those of you who want to check it out. Predator Killer of Killers. And the release date for it is June 6th, 2025. So that's coming up not too far away. And then you reminded me of something before the show.
What'd I do?
You reminded me of something coming out quickly.
Yes.
Soon.
Yes. Are we already talking about next week? This Friday, opening of Mission Impossible, the last one ever, starring Tom Cruise. That's coming out this weekend. I'm looking forward to that. Probably going to see that next weekend.
I'm trying to think. I would love to go see that this weekend, but I don't know if I can manage it.
Oh no.
Because if I did, then we could go watch it on, or we could go talk about it on next Monday's show.
That would be ideal. Maybe you can swing it. It's bound to be in theaters for a few weeks. Yeah, I saw a couple of photos today. Tom Cruise has been doing the media circuit. He was at a New York City preview. Photos of him having a chat with the employees at the cinema and everything. We've said it before on the show. He really likes the craft. He loves movies. He loves making movies and talking about them. And so it's I don't know the next time we'll see anybody like that, if ever.
He just seems to be focused on wanting to entertain the audience, and that seems to be out of vogue nowadays for some reason.
Right.
You can't just be satisfied entertaining the audience. You have to preach at them. That seems to me, in my humble opinion, seems to be a unwise approach to entertainment. I mean, I guess it's okay in a college course because technically you're there to get lectured. But then again, college professors nowadays seem like they're focused on trying to entertain the students. So,
Go figure.
trying to think if there's any other news I saw this week.
No, entertainment news has been pretty slow lately. Yep.
I did see a tweet today from a feminist who was excoriating the romantasy genre. And she said that the romantasy genre is nothing more than conservative propaganda. Now, I should note that the romantasy genre is the genre where you take epic fantasy and replace the epicness with a focus on romance novels that you would get from Harlequin, literally romance novels that you would get from Harlequin, and you put that at its center. And all of the epic fantasy stuff that's there, like magic systems, monstrous creatures, and everything, is technically there, but that's either it's either given equal weight to the romance or it's given second shrift behind the romance. Plus, there is a ton of swearing. It's like a carpet bomb of F-bombs. And there is always, even if it isn't the center of the book, there's always at least one lesbian and one gay romance going on in the background that gets discussed or gets mentioned, even if it's not a focus of the book. Just so you know that sort of thing is going on, and it's socially acceptable to everybody around it. And also, there's always some theme of like bigotry or racism and how bad that is. So, how this comes off as conservative propaganda is really amusing. Now, people who've listened to the show before know that I listened to all 3 books in the Crescent City series, which was sort of urban romantasy, because it does take place in a secondary world, but it had, cell phones and pizza and things like that, but it's all magic based. But it's not like humorous like most of those worlds end up being. Like the case of the Toxic Spell Dump by Turtle Dove. And they also remember my review of Fourth Wing, which is the first book in the Empyrean trilogy about the Dragon Riders. Since reviewing the first book, again on audiobook, I have also listened to the second book, and I'm now about 2 hours into the third book. I'm going to finish that trilogy, just so I can say I finished both trilogies. So this isn't a discussion of the content of romantasy based on reading Wikipedia or just impressions of it. This is based on actually reading almost 2 trilogies of it. But at the same time, it's not impressions from vast knowledge of the genre. I have not consumed, many books in the genre. 2 trilogies or almost 2 trilogies, that's it. But here's what I'm assuming they mean by conservative propaganda. And this was something that I mentioned in a chat on Twitter. So in romantasy, you have a man and a woman in a heterosexual relationship, and the man is attracted to feminine traits, and the woman is attracted to masculine traits. He's tall, he's got a square jaw, he's physically strong, he's, the strong, silent type. He's handsome. I don't know if I said muscular, but he's muscular. She's pretty. She's got feminine features, feminine mannerisms. She's got feminine emotions, very, changeable and dramatic. She wears long hair. She's got pretty eyes. She's got secondary sexual characteristics. I mean, she's got, boobs and hips and a small waist and a nice rear and long legs. And they're what people call, quote unquote, conventionally pretty, which is what you should call actually, attractive. Masculine men, feminine women who are attracted to each other. And they're attracted to each other's personalities as well. They have things in common. They also have misunderstandings between each other. But once they fall in love, they stay loyal to each other and they don't sleep around. They're not involved in polycules. They're not involved in bisexual. They don't have, homosexual pasts. They're straight characters. The protagonist is obviously a woman, but neither of them have been depicted as having like lingering or latent homosexual desires. And at some point, during the Crescent City trilogy, they were both very physically attracted to each other strongly. But they didn't even engage in intercourse until the second book. So you had an entire book of romantasy, which the knock is that it's just porn. They didn't even have sex until the second book. And I'm not saying they waited until they were married, because they didn't. But it certainly was not a pornographic novel, because a pornographic novel or a movie pretty much gets down to sex as soon as possible, very quickly. And in the case of romance, what provides the drama in the relationship and what provides the tension in the relationship is all the things that are keeping them apart, where it's obvious that they desire each other and it's obvious that they are attracted to each other and are falling in love with each other, but the culmination of this doesn't happen for some time uh, in the book because they just keep on getting pushed away by their attitudes. In the case of the Crescent City book, her having a chip on her shoulder about alpha males, which he is. And both of the main male love interests are alpha males. And it's all very, very traditional. And even once they get together and they start dating, sex is put off. And if they break up, they're still loyal to each other. They go through trials and tribulations, or if they don't break up, they still go through struggles, but they stay loyal to each other. And then they work it out and get back together. They question their relationships, things get frosty, but their love is reaffirmed, they make it through incredibly tough times and stay together. So this is not deliberate conservative propaganda. What it is the requisite drama for romance novels. Now, there is, and I don't want you to misunderstand me, there is in both of these series explicit sex, which I fast forwarded to. I kept on hitting the 30-second button until I was through the scenes. And even when there wasn't explicit sex, there was fantasizing about it, or kissing and being, feeling hot and bothered that was described somewhat explicitly. But again, it's a woman heterosexually attracted to a man and not an effeminate man. And not that the main guys are stupid, because they're not. They're very cunning. They're very brutal in battle, but they're smart and brutal in battle. They're not dumb guys. But the women are also very physically attracted to them. They're war makers in both of these books. And that's one of the things about romantasy that I would suspect you don't get in a lot of romance novels, except those that are specifically set in wartime, is that they're warriors. They go out and they kill people. And there's a couple of things, and I'll get to that towards the end. There's a couple of things that a lot of women are blind to, or a lot of modern women don't have experience with directly, that don't show up in the books but should show up in the books. Women don't have direct experience with how much of a turn on it is for women to be around men who have gone out and defended them physically by beating somebody up, or killing them, in war. They think that that's a big turnoff, and they're like, "Oh, you brute, you Neanderthal! How dare you how dare you beat this poor guy up? And they think that they'll have all kinds of empathy for the guy. And some women may be socialized like that, but most women, if you demonstrate that you're physically dominant over someone and you defend them with actual physical violence, they're turned on by it and they can't help themselves. Because physical strength is attractive. And being dominant in a social sphere is attractive. And it's a visceral attraction that you can't avoid. It's just there. So you can see why someone who finds heterosexual relationships and strong and durable heterosexual relationships offensive sees this as conservative propaganda. No, it's not conservative propaganda. It's just the way romance as a genre works. I asked a female friend of mine once about the romance genre, and I told her what I thought it was, and she said, no, 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 that's not what romance is. Because I thought romance was a love triangle. You know, two men, both loved the women, and both loved one woman, and she was torn between choosing between the two of them. She's like, no, that's not what romance is. What romance is a man and a woman who both love each other, but something keeps them apart. Issues of class, like he's high class and she's not, or she's high class and he's not. Issues of, social propriety, or he's been shamed somehow, and so she can't marry him because even though he's, rich, it would be a shame, whatever. Attitudes. He's actually a really good man, but he's rude to everybody, so he has to learn to get over it, whatever. Those kinds of things that define the romance genre, as in the Harlequin book genre, are exactly what both of these trilogies are about. They're about all of these things, but in a fantasy or in a fantasy-urban setting. So people have defined this as the female equivalent of monster girls. And the question is, why isn't romantasy about girls and monsters? Because there are plenty of those. And the answer is there's a dividing line between romantasy and female porn. Romantasy really isn't porn. You may have an R-rated movie with some, and I'm not trying to defend the genre, because I'm not a big fan of explicit sex scenes. But the number of sex scenes, the frequency of sex scenes, and the context they're presented in are just completely different than what you would get in pornography. Pornography has them way more often. They're way more explicit and way more focused on perversion, I guess is just doing different things for the sake of doing different things. Whereas these are focusing on the relationship. The sex scenes are focusing on the relationship. In addition to the sex, they're focusing on the relationship, the development of the characters, how they feel about it afterwards, what it means, whether or not they got caught, what they're risking by doing this. But everybody knows what porn is. There's no risk, there's no long term consequences. You don't worry about pregnancy, you don't worry about um, what it means for your emotions. You don't worry about whether you just got attached to someone who's good for you or bad for you. It's no consequences. That's the point of pornography. You present sex as if it just exists in this void, um, as if it's this circus act, and you're doing a bunch of different things because you just have to keep changing it up because there's nothing else there. There's no context for it. There's no fabric around it. And in these romantasy books, there is a story and there is social fabric around it. There is emotional fabric around it. So I'm not saying there's not smutty things in there. I'm just saying that the smutty things are there not as often, not as circusette, and existing in the context of a story where people have genuine interest and genuine emotions for each other, because that's what romance readers are expecting. That's not what smut readers are expecting. And most of those female written smut, I haven't read any of that. Okay. Seems to be focused on, and I don't plan to, there's a limit to what I can tolerate.
You're not
Seems to
gonna
be
do that
focused,
research? You're not gonna
no,
take that bullet for everybody?
no. Um, there are just some lines I'm not going to cross. Um, it seems to be focused on trying to genuinely tell good tales. So, um, yeah, that's what I would say is why they see it as conservative propaganda.
Yeah, you
And
can
then,
see it. You can see why they would say that. Because, quote unquote, to someone who of that bent, to some sort of leftist or postmodern feminist, their view of reality is so warped that by necessity, things that are normal must be wrong, or they must be conservative, or they must be propaganda. Um, it's pure projection, whether they realize it or not. It's because their view of reality is so twisted that um, even in their little smut book, if it presents normal relationships with normal people's, desires and values and things, it's it's off. It reflects to them reality, and they're so disassociated from reality that it causes that kind of cognitive dissonance that there's something wrong with it, and they have to find the name for what's wrong with it. So obviously it's propaganda.
I I would not have thought so before I listened to these two trilogies. Um, but there really is a difference between porn and romantasy, even though romantasy has sexually explicit scenes. I,
You should definitely check in with some more women because from as I understand it, that is essentially women's porn. that
Um,
it's a woman's porn isn't necessarily back-to-back sex scenes in the same way that, um, your standard men's pornography is.
the in the 70s and 80s, you had a bunch of serial novels like The Destroyer and um, oh, what are some of those? I was just looking at him today. The guy who killed all the mafia people again and again and again for like hundreds of novels. The Equalizer. Um, and they were thrillers, but they would all have, I have gathered, all have explicit sex scenes because it was just the idea in the 70s uh, that you had to have explicit sex scenes to sell. Um, but those were thrillers with an explicit sex scene. They weren't porn. So there really is a difference between something that has an explicit sex scene in it and something that is porn. And I'm not saying that that's right or that's I'm not trying to defend the explicit sex scene. I'm just saying that there
Yeah, I
really
get you.
is
I
a
get you.
difference.
It sounds like when there's when there's TNA in your adventure film, you're like, well, that wasn't necessary, but I get it.
Yeah.
I get why someone would put that in there.
It's like someone saying, "Oh yeah, the uh, Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue is pornography." I'm like, no, it's really not. I mean, it is. You know, it is pushing. Uh, it hasn't crossed the line yet. It is about scantily clad women, but it's not pornography. There's just a line there that Sports Illustrated doesn't cross, but Playboy does. I don't know. So
You know it when you see it.
yeah. So, anyways, I'm not trying to. I did like the Crescent City series. There was a lot to like about it. I would not recommend it per se, but there were a lot of things I enjoyed about it. But I think a lot of what I enjoyed about it were interesting bits that you could use as a game master if you were building something like that. And I don't necessarily think other male readers would appreciate what I got out of it. Um, so that I had an ulterior motive listening to it is why I enjoyed it more than I would have otherwise. Um, and the Imperium um, is a lot better written than most of the things that get tossed out there. Um, but it's still not. Uh, it's still overtaken with special syndrome, uh, where the main character is just the specialist person of everybody, and that kind of bothers me. But anyways, let's talk about. Do you have any other questions or?
I don't. I don't. Can't stand the stuff. No.
I
Yeah.
certainly understand it.
Yeah.
Um, so I a, a short while ago, I reviewed a movie called Tenebrae, and it's an Italian giallo film by Dario Argento. I gave it quite a positive review because I like it. It's a really good movie. And by modern standards, it's not all that shocking, but by the standards of when it was made in the 70s, it was so shocking. It got banned in Great Britain as one of their video nasties, which was just a list of films that you could not watch, buy, or sell in in Great Britain. So I decided, or I was struck with a sudden curiosity, given uh, a menu of a few Giallo movies to watch, that I would watch another Giallo movie. And I must have misread it because it said it was by a different director, but it turned out to also be by Dario Argento. And it was the first movie in his career. And it's called, he's the one who made Suspiria, which just got recently remade. And it seems like the American remake wasn't very good, but I'm told the original Suspiria is quite excellent. And I may watch a few more Giallos just to check them out because they're very stylish, very stylized movies. They have a very great use of color, um, great use of music. Um, the actresses are all, unless they're character actresses, they're all reliably very beautiful, which was the case for everybody in the 70s, because we still believed in beauty in actresses, unlike modern movies. But it's just refreshing to see a movie where you're not being told that you have to believe that this actress, who is just not glamorous or gorgeous, is the most beautiful woman in the entire galaxy. And you're like, no, I don't believe you. She might be the prettiest gymnast on a college team that I can buy. She is not the most beautiful woman in the entire galaxy.
Right.
And I'm sure people know what I'm referring to. Um, this movie was called The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Also, all the titles of Giallos are just gorgeous. They're absolutely fantastic. They're these lovely Baroque titles that are long and intriguing and interesting. The other movie I'm going to talk about is The Corruption of Chris Miller, which is, I think it's another interesting title. So the Tenebrae, if you remember, is about an American thriller author who comes to Rome to finish his book and get it published. And then people begin dying. They begin getting murdered in the same way as they are murdered in the book that he published just recently.
Oh yeah.
And most giallos are murder mysteries or murder thrillers. There is a string of murders, and the main character is not a policeman who is nevertheless drawn, for whatever reason, into solving or being forced to solve these murders. And somewhere along the way, the killer starts coming after them. So, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Uh, so these are in common with the genre, right? So The Bird with the Crystal Plumage is about an American writer who has come to Rome on a vacation to try and get over his writer's block. And he's there with his long-term girlfriend, and there has been some murders of beautiful women going on that he knows nothing about, he has no connection with. And then he is walking home one night and he sees one of the murders taking place, and he saves the young lady's life by interfering, and the killer runs away. And from that point on, his life is in danger, and the police call him in and interrogate him for hours and hours and hours about what he saw, and then take his passport away and won't let him return to America. And so he starts investigating these murders so he can try and get his passport back so he can get out of the country, because the killer's trying to kill him. And the policemen do offer some bodyguards, but the killer hires at one point a hitman to come and kill him, and the hitman kills the policeman bodyguard first. So the movie is I would give it a 7 out of 10. It is not as good as Tenebrae. It does have a lot of twists and turns. I did not see the twists and turns coming. Other people may have seen them before me, and it might have ruined the movie. I don't know that they would, but they might have. It was an enjoyable movie, just not as good as Tenebrae. And I've heard that Tenebrae is one of Dario Argento's best movies. So I may have had my expectations set very, very high by watching that one first, by like watching one of his best first, and just expecting that of all his movies. But it is, however, very enjoyable. Again, it's not at all bloody by the standards of modern movies, but back in the day, it was considered very shocking. And it deals with some scary subject matter in those days. Nowadays, Murder, She Wrote would have just a scary subject matter, but not more blood. There are some fabulous characters who show up in the movie. Characters you could not get away with in cinema today. There's an art shop, an art gallery owner who is hilarious. The artist that he has to go consult with is just incredibly funny. And it may be worth watching a good but not great movie just for the secondary characters. The police chief who keeps him in the country is a good character. And the main character himself is a great, colorful character. Not colorful. He's a good character. And again, the men are very masculine men. The women are very feminine women. And it's refreshing to see those kinds of things playing out. In fact, I'm pretty sure, as far as writing goes, if you're a writer and you're listening to this, if you want clear visions of masculine men and feminine women, old movies are some of the best ways to go get ideas of what that is. Not like Hollywood's new age movies with, like Easy Rider, things like that. Those are terrible. But golden age of Hollywood movies or foreign films up through the 70s, you just didn't have a lot of Italian movies, especially, seem to have kept their grasp on masculinity and femininity longer. I would not recommend reading science fiction and fantasy for that kind of thing, because fantasy and science fiction authors have always been kind of the pervert end of the pool. Um, and that's at least since who is it, JD? I can tell you. Give me a sec. What JD Cowan wrote about in his book that we've pushed on the show before, uh, the fandom revolution, is that it? The
The
fandom
Fandom
menace?
Menace.
Yeah.
Fandom Menace. Yeah, it's true. Science fiction authors are the worst.
They, a lot of them were very ideologically driven and were tended to be urban, tended to be bohemian, even as
Root,
far back as the 30s.
rootless cosmopolitans, even.
Yeah. Um, or the 20s, bohemians. Um, and so they rejected masculinity and femininity in large ways because the sort of restraint, the sort of moral restraint that allows you to build a masculine character, um, to build strong masculinity and strong femininity, didn't really exist in what those circles became. And it's unfortunate, but so I don't know for sure because I've never read westerns, but I get the feeling that old westerns, um, or westerns such as Louis L'Amour, have very masculine leading men and very feminine women. So if you don't want to read uh, westerns, then I would definitely. It seems like a lot of foreign films, Italian films, have definitely been that way. Um, a lot of non-English language films, um, like Jason and the Argonauts. These other films in the 60s and 70s, Ben-Hur, uh, and these were a lot of these Hollywood films did, and especially Western movies out of the 50s and 60s, did retain a strong sense of masculinity and femininity. So if you want to understand those things, um, without the admixture of modernisms distorting them, and just get a grasp on what femininity and masculinity really is, before modernity came along and sort of distorted them or muddied the waters, those are good places to go, and just watch how the men and women interact. So let's And Dundermoose is talking about Neil Gaiman, but Isaac Asimov was known to, I'm not saying he did all the things that Neil Gaiman did, but he was known to do other things to the women around him that were boorish, that were, being a cad. And of course, his books had a lot of uh, um, and Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein. That's just, and this was uh, long before the new wave came along. So, but anyways, let's go to the second movie, The Corruption of Chris Miller. So, The Corruption of Chris Miller was way, way, way oversold to me. And I watched it because what I was told the movie was, and what the movie actually was two completely different things. And so I want to read this to you. In the week, with a real deal masterpiece of super stylish Spanish horror, a giallo tinted psychosexual fever dream filled with nudity, extreme violence, a potent mystery, grisly shocks, and a ballistic performance from the late, great queen of the French New Wave, Jean Seberg. This is one of the greatest Euro horror movies the 70s ever saw, and if you haven't seen it, now's your chance. I thought I would be watching a great thriller in the giallo tradition, but made by a Spanish director. This is what I was promised by the movie's description. This is what I felt I was owed by the movie's description. This is not what I got. I would say this.
Description is a very odd word to call ad copy.
I would say this movie is 6.5 out of 10. It may not be a bad movie, but when you prime someone up with that description and they're expecting an 8 or 9, to get a 6 or 6.5 is a tremendous letdown. So let me go over the good things real quick. The two women in the movie, it's about a mother and a daughter and a man who comes into their life. The two women in the movie are gorgeous. Better looking than the women in The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. The performances people give in the movie are great. The performance by the handyman, the man who comes into the movie, is weaker than the two females who are the leads deliver. there is very little violence. There is some violence. There are two violent scenes that I can remember. Uh, to call this a psychosexual thing is to really, really greatly uh, stretch the definition of psychosexual. Um, there is a mystery with some twists and turns that you don't see coming. But the reason why you don't see the twists and turns coming is because the movie starts off with, and I'm afraid this is going to be a huge spoiler for a 55-year-old movie. So if you haven't seen it before now, you're going to be getting a little spoiler.
Pause the video, pause the podcast,
Or
and watch
fast
it
forward.
immediately.
Is because the movie, once you reach the end and you find out what's going on, you realize that the movie starts with the biggest coincidence in the world. And then everything in the movie proceeds from there as if that wasn't what actually really happened. So there's just a big lie that they tell you right at the beginning. It's not in that sense, it's not a fair mystery because they just outright lie to you right at the beginning.
Oh, that's not a mystery at all. It's a bait and switch.
Yes, it's a bait and switch. Um, the movie is about a mother and a daughter. The father has abandoned them. They've come out to this manor in the Spanish countryside where the mom is really, really rich and was before she met her husband. He was some kind of circus performer or something, and she fell in love with him, and they were together for 11 years, and then he took off. And when he was taking off, he stole everything in the house from her, except for something that she kept secret and hidden. So her and her daughter have come up this manor to get out of England. They're both originally English because she can't stand to be there when he took off. And her daughter is suffering from what we would call nowadays PTSD. There was something horrific that happened to her, which you eventually learn about through the course of the movie. And she has a very delicate mental state, which, by the way, is also one of the common features of the giallo or giallo genre, is that female protagonists or females in the movie tend to have very delicate mental states or tend to be outright insane. Um, and her daughter is very angry at the mom because she blames the mom for the dad leaving, and she says the dad's going to come back any day now and get her and take her away, and then she'll be with her dad. And her mom says, "No, you're not going to be taken away by your dad. He's not coming. He hates you. He left you." And the movie is this power play between the mother and the daughter. And the movie is also, she's the mother is an older woman. She's like 45, 50. she's very beautiful. She's very, she's aging gracefully. Um, but there is a tramp who has come into the manor, and he's a college student from America who is just wandering, backpacking around Europe, and he seduces the mom and talks his way against her better judgment into staying around the house and living with them by doing odd jobs. He sort of becomes their handyman. He mows the lawn, he trims bushes, he fixes things, whatever. And the daughter is jealous of the mom and is trying to seduce him, but every time she goes to get close to him, she freaks out. And every time it rains, she freaks out. And every time the lights go out, she freaks out, especially when it's raining. And there are a string of home invasions around, close to and around where this village they live next to is. And we strongly suspect that it's this hiker for good reason, because he's always searching around the house. The home invasions are to steal money. And the person kills the people in the house. So the two violence scenes, the two really bloody scenes are, the person breaks in to two different houses and kills the person there. And they're described as, a good looking younger man with a backpack and a guitar. Which is this handyman. He has a backpack, he has a guitar. That's what he does. And we are given to understand that because all he does when they're not looking his way is he spends his entire time searching through the house for money, for her jewels, for anything. And he also is stealing a lot of small things and putting them in his backpack. And there's also this sense of menace whenever he's around the daughter. But gradually it's unearthed that this mother, she's actually the stepmom of the daughter. She's not her biological mother. That she does not love this daughter, that she's really malevolent. And that unlike what she tells the daughter, she does expect the father to come for her someday. And by way of revenge, she's trying to change the daughter so that the father won't recognize her by putting her through an emotional and mental wringer, by deliberately pushing her buttons, pushing at her psychological weaknesses, trying to push her to the breaking point. And there is hinted at in the movie that the stepmother, and again, I did not know this going in, it's hinted at in the movie that she's trying to corrupt the daughter. That's why the movie is called The Corruption of Chris Miller, because the daughter's name is Chris Miller. It's hinted at in the movie in one scene, never mentioned directly, never mentioned at all, just hinted at indirectly at one point, that, and I may have misread this, but it's hinted at that the mother may have seduced the stepdaughter at some point. And that may be the corruption she's trying to lead the daughter into. And then things get bloody and things go bad, and a body gets buried, and the person who's doing all these home invasions is revealed, and the body is hidden pretty well, but then the police discover the body, and we're left hanging at the end of the movie as to whether the perpetrator or perpetrators responsible for the body. It seems like they're going to get caught, but we don't ever see it. So the actress who plays the mother is Jean Seberg. And she hated the movie because of its lurid subject matter, but did it because of the money. So there are some disturbing elements that are deniable that you wouldn't notice unless you were an adult, which I still am not sure that my interpretation of what was going on was correct. There was a very good tension between the mother and the daughter and the vagrant, the American student, and there, the various twists and turns that came were really good. The mother is extremely attractive for how old she was, and the daughter is just gorgeous. And let me run down the list of the things it was sold on. There is some extreme violence, but there is not. It's not filled with extreme violence. It's not filled with extreme, with grisly shocks. There is literally like a quarter of a second of nudity, and it shows partially exposed buttocks of the vagrant, the guy. So, for all intents and purposes,
not exactly your CD70s romp.
No, it's really not. And I was like, okay, I can handle this. I've watched worse movies before for reviews, because murder mystery, great horror. It's not really a horror movie. It's not a horror movie. Many giallos are a lot of the things that you get in slasher movies in the 80s that people were so upset about. Like in Friday the 13th, that POV shot where Jason is wandering around from first person view and then he looks at his knife and then he stabs it into somebody or whatever. people were like, oh, this is so horrible. Hollywood is doing something so terrible. They're inviting the audience to see themselves from the point of view of the killer. I can't believe Hollywood can. That was literally from the Italian giallos. That was done decade and a half before Hollywood even thought of it. That was in both Tenebrae and The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, and it came from earlier movies than that. From movies in like the late 60s. So, yeah, this was not a horror movie. This was not a slasher movie. It was just, and in this movie, The Corruption of Chris Miller, when you're watching the second extreme violent scene, he's going into the house to kill people. You see at least part of it from his point of view. It's people were hyperventilating over Friday the 13th, and it was late to the party. It was not some new depredation of Hollywood. It was not something they just came up with. It was something that had come out of Italian cinema over a decade before. It's really hilarious because I literally read that article in a newspaper while I was in middle school. And it's funny to look back on that now. I just remember that article from middle school. It's funny to look back on that now as an adult, 40 years later and think, wait a minute, these giallos had it way before that guy was freaking out. So would I recommend these movies? They're good, but not great. So however that lands on your plate, if you're a person who has a low tolerance for good but not great movies, if you just hate them, no, probably not. If you have I will say this, The Corruption of Chris Miller has a great depiction of a seduction of an older lady by a younger man. It perfectly depicts how a woman is drawn to a man physically, but trying to tell him to go, to leave, to get away, while her body is responding to him, and eventually she just gives in. Again, if you're a writer and you want to see what that looks like, the two actors involved did a fabulous job. And I realize a lot of my recommendations are based on things you can get from these movies and not while being directly enjoying watching them. But it is an enjoyable movie, good but not great. But man, the way he seduces the older lady is also heavily based on masculinity and femininity. He stands up and he's naked because he spent the night sleeping in the straw in her garage. And when he stands up, they show her, and her eyes just dip for a second. And it's enough to let the audience know what happened. But it's very subtle. They don't show him being naked except that quarter-second shot of his partially nude buttocks. But that's enough to let the audience know he's naked. And her eyes dipping let them know what she saw, and then her reaction to it lets her know that she was affected by what she saw. So it was probably large. Someone young watching that, not that someone young should be watching that, wouldn't get that. But her reaction, the dip of her eyes, lets you know she was impressed by the magnitude of what she saw. And it was all very subtly done. So it is a good movie. They did a lot of good stuff in it. Just wasn't a great movie. Tenebrae was a great movie. It was a fabulous movie. And I definitely would recommend that just on the fact that it's a great movie. But The Bird with the Crystal Plumage and The Corruption of Chris Miller are both good movies, but not great.
Sounds good. Good chat, TW.
And again, it was great to have another week where I could watch, good stuff and not suffer through just unending pain.
Simon Hogwood, thanks for hanging out. He suggests that tasteful is the word you were looking for.
Oh, yes, tasteful. It's very tastefully done. So, yeah.
All sounds good. I mean, it's you can do so much in a film or a show with suggestion, and it's nearly a lost art.
Yeah.
Because it's the situation that's interesting, that you're not, the point isn't just to titillate the audience,
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else before we go?
No, I'm done. Thanks a lot, DW.
Okay. This has been Geek Gab for Monday, May 19th, 2025. We want to thank everybody who is tuned in live. We want to thank everybody who will tune in later. Geek Gab is here every Monday night, or just about every Monday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And you can catch us on youtube.com/GeekGab. Once again, that's youtube.com/GeekGab. Please be sure to subscribe, click the bell icon, and click like if you enjoyed our show tonight. You can also get us on iTunes. You can get us on the Google Play Store, and you can get us on SoundCloud.com. Subscribe to us on the device of your choice. Oh, just do a search for Geek Gab on any of those places. Subscribe to us on the device of your choice. Download us to your computer. Listen to us on the web. We are available in all those places to make things enjoyable and easy for you. Folks, we are signing out for today, but don't you worry, don't you fret, we will be back.